So I'm sticking to my guns because I remember I made a video about gear I use and I talked about I'm going to talk about lens filters. So that's what today's conversation is all about. Lens filters. A little confessional about me as I didn't get into lens filters. Well, like it's not a trend, but I didn't buy lens filters until end of 2022 going to 2023 because when I started my photography journey, this is my defense, when I started my photography journey in 2016, I worked at a coffee shop and wasn't making a lot of money. So a lot of my money was going to camera bodies and a lens. I say bodies, but I meant body, just one. And so I didn't have enough money to buy lens filters because lens filters are not cheap. They're pretty expensive. I mean, the most expensive I have is about like $275, I think. But I know it's in the 200 range. So at someone who works at a coffee shop, you can't really buy lens filters. You can't buy a whole bunch of them. So you want to focus on other things. But also on YouTube in 2016, there was this weird back and forth battle that lens filters were either bad or good. You had one side who were saying that they do a color shift, they make you lose detail, they're just worthless piece of junks. But then you have really good photographers who I should have listened to. But then back to my conversation about me working in a coffee shop, I couldn't afford one. They were talking about how great lens filters are and what you can do with them. So although I could have hopped on this bandwagon way before, I did not. That's just kind of the moral of the story. Actually, there's no moral of the story. That's just my confessional. But jump to now. I have 3 lens filters that I use a lot. I know I'm going to buy more because glass technology, or however you make it, or glass manufacturing has gone way better. That it's these lens filters just get better and better, and they make photographing anywhere or whatever you're doing easier in a sense. Especially it was so hard for me. Especially special effect lens filters, which I will get into a little bit. But like I said, this is me confessing. This is me telling you about lens filters because that I feel like now still people who've done photography longer than I have also are like, what are lens filters? Are they important? Why should I buy them? And like, do they even do anything? That's the common question I get told a lot is, what are lens filters? So this entire video is about these guys and what some do and what you really need them for. So with that being said, let's hop right into it. Now, there are 3 different types of lens filters that you can buy. You have your standard thread screw-on ones that are these right here. They screw on to the lens like that right here on this circle. Then you have your matte boxes, which you may have seen like on TV shows when someone's on a movie set. The matte boxes are attached onto the outer portion of a lens, and then people will slide like a filtered glass to it to do what it needs to do. And then you have your slide-in lenses or lens filters that slide into the back of the lens. They're mainly used on big telephoto lenses because I think if I recall, the max filter that people usually make are 96 millimeters. I could be wrong about that. There could be someone making bigger, but with also at the same time, like telephoto lenses are huge, like the big 600, 400 ones. Like you don't want to reach over and constantly trying to screw them in. So they go in the back. They're like a slide piece. They're sometimes yay big, and they just slide in the back of the lens, and then you now have a lens filter on your super telephoto lens. So those are like the 3 types you'll see. I know in day and age there's more that comes out, so we shall see what happens. But within the lens filters, like the different types, there are different categories. Maybe that's the word I can use, categories for these, because each lens filter does a different job. We can start with the first one that I don't have because I don't know why. I just did never buy one. Maybe because I also just feel like I'm very careful with my lenses. Is a UV lens filter. Now it literally let's use this step down ring as an example. It would look just like this. It would be a glass here, and it's clear. But UV lenses are really cool because the UV filters, I can't even talk today. The UV filters are, they kind of say like they cut out pollution. So if you ever take a photo of like a certain area and there's like a weird hazy thing on there, UVs usually kind of help prevent that. You usually see that a lot in like kind of like coastal areas because of like some of the offshore winds. But that's what UV filters use. I don't own one because I just never seen the use of one. They also are very good to protecting your lenses. So if you're out backpacking, people say slap those on because I've seen stories of people like accidentally swinging their lens into a rock, but the UV filter breaks, but not this. The next lens filter is the ND filters. So ND stands for neutral density. That's today's word of the day. It stands for neutral density. These, I would say, are considered like, not the sunglasses for lens filters, but they kind of do what sunglasses do, and they reduce the amount of light around you, whether it's the sun, studio light, or whatever bright thing is hitting you. Now, what's cool about ND filters is that they serve a bigger purpose depending what you're doing, whether it's photography or videography. And like I said, ND filters reduce light. So if you're shooting in a slow shutter speed in a bright day, because you want to kind of get that little fancy little water flowy cloud look, like I have an example photo here when I shot in Iceland. If you want to kind of get that little cloudy feel, you have to obviously slow down your shutter speed, but when you do that, you're allowing more light into, like, is that the best way to say it? Yeah, you're allowing more light to your sensor, which becomes overly exposed. With a ND, you can attach that to it where it cuts that light down. So, you can get that flowy photo without being entirely overexposed. If you're shooting very wide open for portraits in mid daylight, they kind of help because it allows you to shoot wide open without having to push your shutter speed or without having doing a lot of post-process work trying to make the highlights not look too harsh. Another thing about ND filters is that for a while, there was just, you had to constantly switch glasses because they'd be like, this one ND is 2 stops, this one is 4 stops, this one is 8 stops. Now introduce, well, like, it's not brand new, but I'm just saying now as we get further into making more lens filters, they introduced the variable ND filter, which I have here. This is what I prefer the most. And what that means is that if you look closely, if I can kind of show you, so there is this little clip here, and they're not designed the same way, but this kind of just a summary of it. So you can see numbers. I have a 5, 4, and a 3, and then you can't see it, but there's a 2. So when I would adjust this, it moves how many stops of light. So I can go from 2 to 5, just pretty easy without having to switch a lens filter. There are, I think, 6 to 10, and then there's 12 to 15s, I believe. I'm not doing the memory correctly, but yeah, variable ND filters allow you to adjust through the lens without having to switch it off. And I'll actually show you what it looks like if I attach this easily with one try. If I can't do it, no, please help me. I'm really bad at this, just letting you guys know. But it's also because I turned it the wrong way. So this is at 2 stops. Now, technically, this is perfectly exposed. My meter is saying it's 0, 0. That's how it is. Now, of course, if I wanted to adjust it, and you can actually see it happening right now, you can see it get darker. It's now completely dark, and I'm underexposed. So that's what pretty much ND filters do. They really reduce the amount of light that is hitting your sensor, especially if you're doing slower shutter speeds, especially if you're filming videos. I film at 1/60th of a second, and I need something to cut it. Or if you're doing 24 frames at 1/50th, that's what you use it for. That is what ND filters are. There is another type of ND filter. It's called graduated ND filter. They're more of a glass rather than a circular lens. They're the ones that would slide into a matte box. What's cool about those is that if you're ever taking a photo of a mountain and the top part is bright, but the bottom part is like very, not shadowy, but it's very darker and stuff. So a graduated ND filter, and I think they should just call it a gradient neutral density filter. But what it is, and then let me see if I can draw it. What it is just pretty much like I said, is a box like this. And then there's a gradient. So this is left like not dark, and then this is dark. So what it does is that you put the dark part at the brightest point, and then you leave this in the darkest point. So that way it like levels out the light. So that is what a gradient lens filter does. I haven't used one personally. I do want to use one because I kind of want to like see what it looks like. But like I said, they only sell them in a glass form. I haven't seen a circular form. maybe I'm just not doing well in my research. But another, and lastly, lens filter you'll see a lot. These are kind of the top three, are polarizer lens filters. Polarizer lens filters, what they do is that they cut out any kind of form of light that is hitting a reflective spot. So for example, like if you want to take a photo of this picture behind me, but you notice that there's all this light behind it, that you can see my reflection, a polarizer filter will do that. It will cut away all that reflection. If you've seen people being photographed through a window and you're wondering how the hell they're doing that, that's what a polarizer lens filter does, is that it cuts out that reflection. Or when you see landscape photos of a mountain being reflected on a body of water, that's what a lens filter does, polarizer lens filter does. It cuts out that reflection. Some people say those are the sunglasses of lens filters, but I really think they should be described better because I mean, I guess I have polarizer sunglasses that cut out reflection and light, but you get my point. Actually, when I attach this polarizer lens filter, it kind of does reduce my exposure. So it does work like a sunglasses, I guess you can put it that way. But all in all, those are kind of three main you'll see. Then you have your special effects lens filters. They're more of like to kind of change the way your photo looks. Like if you want those like blue light streaks, if it's hitting like a street lamp or something like that, or there's some that do like the hexagon bumblebee eye look. Then you have your close-up. So if you want to increase your minimum focal distance on your, lens filter, on your lens, because each lens has a minimum focal distance. If you want to increase it because you want to get a little bit more close-up shot, you just attach that on there. Then you have your colored one. This is just self-explanatory. They're like color gels, but instead of on a flash, it goes onto a lens. And then you have your, I want to separate these because they're kind of cool, even though they're considered special effects. Mist diffusion lens filters. These are my favorite ones. I've talked about this lens filter, the everyday one by Sort Stash. It's a polarizer and a mist diffusion, but the best way to kind of explain mist diffusion is if you look at this form of light right here, this light kind of has somewhat of a glow, but when you attach a mist diffusion, it is more of a like softer kind of style. So if I attach it, you can kind of see that lens, this highlight here, if I can fix it, is a little bit softer. Not a good example, but that's what it does. Especially if you have neon signs, like it does a really nice, like kind of soft glow around it. Or the correct term is a halation. So that's what a mist diffusion does. Then those are just your standard lens filters that you would see about. I wouldn't say standard. Those are just lens filters you see around the world. So now I use mainly 3 lens filters. I use a variable ND because when I do shoot open wide, and then when I'm shooting video outside in a bright location, this is kind of my best friend. This one is by Polar Pro. This is the Peter McKinnon Signature Edition 2. This is a variable ND, but also a polarizer. So I get the best of both worlds, and I don't have to stack lens filters because after that, it just becomes a headache. I have my everyday one, my Sort Stash. It's another Polar Pro one. This was like a collaboration. This is my favorite one I've ever used because like I said, it makes all the highlights really glow. It kind of softens a lot of like harsh textures. But you don't lose blacks. Like it keeps the blacks, and then the contrast is very rich. So you don't have to do much like contrast adjusting when you're using this filter. That's why I will also say be careful with your contrast with some polarizer lens filters, because polarizers do also make your colors pop. I forgot to mention that. They make your colors pop. They make your greens look greener, your blues look bluer. So be careful when using contrast on any type of polarizer lens filter. And then I have this one, which is exactly the same, but this is just a little bit, I think what this here is 1/4 of a stop, and then this one here is half a stop. So this one's a little bit stronger. So those are the 3 lens filters I use. I do recommend doing some research on them because although you'll hear a lot of people say, Polar Pro is the best, they entirely are, but they can be pricey, but they're also not better, but they're also really good companies out there like K&F Concepts. They have been in the industry for a while. They make great lens filters. They're roughly around the same price. There could be a few cheaper ones, but they make good ones. There's also other companies like Nisi, that's another company. You'll start to see other companies like Newer. They make some lens filters, but this kind of leads into the conversation about sometimes cheaper is never better. When I talked about how I couldn't afford lens filters in the beginning of this video, I didn't want to buy cheap lens filters because cheap lens filters are more plastic than they are glass. And so what that means is that you're gonna get horrible vignetting, horrible color shifts. You're gonna get this weird like yellow tint sometimes on ND filters. So I'd rather, at that moment, I was rather just save up my money and just buy expensive lens filters. I didn't really get to do that, but when you are kind of like in that status of buying lens filters, do your research, understand like, hey, if this lens filter is $50, is it good? More or less, it's not. It's going to be a horrible lens filter. If a filter is $400, look it up. Is it really worth the price? Because, like I said, this ND filter right here is only, I think it was $250. I could be wrong, but it's a great lens filter. The everyday one I got from SourceShash, I think this one was $150. It does a great job. So sometimes expensive doesn't mean better. It's just somebody wants to hike up the prices. So definitely do your research. Make sure you're cautious about it. Another tip about lens filters is that I would recommend getting the widest lens filter you can get. So all my lens filters are all the same length. They are 82 millimeters. This fits on my 24-70 that I'm filming on right now. But of course, I have prime lenses, I have telephoto lenses. All my prime lenses are 67 millimeters, and then all my telephoto lenses are all 77 millimeters. So the one thing I would recommend getting is step-up rings. They look like this. These are it. So these right here they will attach to your lens. If I can, I always mess up on the 77, so let me do it on the 67. It's a little bit easier. So they go on here, and then you put this the 82 millimeter lens filter like that, and boom, it's done. So a step-up ring is pretty much taking the diameter and stepping up to whatever lens filter you have. So this is a 67 to 82. This one is a 77 to 82. So if you're like, hey, like I don't want to buy so many lens filters, I could only afford one or two, just buy one, and then you can get step-up rings for like $24. Be mindful though, the same conversation, cheaper is never better, because I've had step-up rings that like broke easily or get stuck on my lens, and you don't want that to happen because then you have to get pliers and you can fuck up your lens like that. That's just a good trick to have is get these. Do not get stepped-out rings. Do not go from don't go from like you have an 82 or you have a 67 lens filter and then you go up to an 82. Do not get that. Don't get an 82 to 67. Yes, that's the best way to say it. In other words, so like, let's say your lens filter is a 67 and you want to put on your 70 millimeter lens, which is that diameter is 82, you're going to get horrible vignettes because now you're putting a smaller lens filter onto a bigger lens or a bigger like diameter, and it's going to cause like horrible vignetting like around your frame. My apologies. So do not buy step-up rings. Do not. Just get step-ups. Find 67 to 82. Perfect. No problem with vignetting. None. Silt. But other than that, I mean, that's lens filters. That's what lens filters are all about. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any, like, hey, like, is this one good or not bad? I can try my best to answer that question. But I hope this video helps you because I know, like, there are people out there who don't know lens filters, or they do, but they don't know a lot about them. I wish I kind of had, like, someone help me because, like I said, there's so much noise out there on social media that you never know what to buy or if it's worth it. So I really make these videos to kind of simplify that for you guys. Anyways, if you want to ask any questions, comment down below. Other than that, like and subscribe. I like making these videos because I love being informative. And somebody actually said that they like my videos because it's like I'm having a conversation with someone. And the trick for me to film is to pretend I'm having a conversation with one of my friends. So that's how I do it. Other than that, thank you for joining. Catch you all later. And I don't know. Peace.